everyone, it's Paul back again, just having a look at some more of my equipment. Today we are going to look at my Trace Elliot GP12SMX bass amplifier. The reason we're going to look at this one is because it's broken. We have a problem with the power amp section in there, and I'm going to speak a little bit about the power amps and just let you know some of the problems that you can get and how you might be able to fix them. The Trace Elliot SM and SMX series, that's the sound management series, have a number of different power amps in them. One of which was a 300 watt bipolar amp, and I have over here a very broken one. Most of them that I've seen have had problems with tracks being burnt out or other issues. There's usually been some bad repairs, and you can probably see on this one where people have attempted to jump at broken tracks and various other things. Taking the heat sinks of the power transistor of this one, that's when I was looking at it. You can see this one actually set on fire. This power amp is called the Bipolar Bear, which is a pun on words. You may be able to see that there. And there's also a Star Wars reference on here in the middle there. You may see that it says "Make it so, #1". These were problematic, well known to be problematic, to the point where I understand from anecdotally that Trace Elliot had to replace a whole bunch of these. So they got one of their other designers, Clive Button, who designed a lot of the Trace Elliot bass amps, actually designed a replacement for this, and there's a MOSFET. So because we can't get hold of a MOSFET board, and I have tried, I've been in touch with British Audio in the US, who seem to be the only people now that stock old stock Trace Elliot components. Because they do actually have British Audio, the bare boards, so if you were really into electronics, you could try and buy all the components and solder one to get it yourself. I wasn't too keen on that idea. I've got a reasonable electronics background, but I'm by no means an expert, so didn't fancy trying to build a complete board from scratch. You don't know what the component availability is either. So because I couldn't get hold of a replacement MOSFET board, I decided to have a look around the internet and see what I could find in terms of replacement. I spoke to a couple of engineers. One gentleman was looking at creating a D-class replacement amp for the Trace, and the other one was a gentleman who'd been making MOSFET replacements in the past. And that second gentleman actually still had some stock of his boards available. Don't have his permission to actually talk about his board, so I may try and get that permission and put it in the notes below if I can provide his contact details. But he actually built me a new board. So the board I've currently got in here is a Bipolar Bear. It had some problems. I repaired it myself. The amp is currently working, but I don't think it's going to be reliable. Certainly my experience of these Bipolar Bears, and I've had a few, is they all fail eventually, and sometimes like this one catastrophically. So what did I get sent? A nice package. Sorry, my chair is slipped. Nice package all the way from the United Kingdom, and this is the gentleman's own design 300 watt MOSFET board, and look at that, it's a work of art, really does look the business. So what I need to do first of all is a few tests of my current amplifier. So the gentleman's recommended I do a couple of these tests, so I'll take you through those. All being well, if those tests are okay, we're going to go ahead and fit this board and see amplifier actually works. And, hopefully we can get ourselves a reliable amp. Okay, so here we got the amp. First thing to note, this is a 1998 build amp. Okay, but if we look over here at our Bipolar Bear, you can see the capacitors are dated 1996. There's a very good reason for that, and that's because I swapped the board out. So the burnt out board I showed you earlier actually belonged to this amp originally, and this is a board from another amp. So what I did manage to do is get another replacement from someone, which is another Bipolar Bear, which I put in that other amp and replaced it. Now what the instructions told me to do was to test what voltage was being pushed out to the preamp from the power amp. Now you can see here that there are some cables here coming to these cables here. They come to this little board at the back here, which obviously controls some of the outputs at the back, and then from this board we get some wires coming down here. But the actual power to the preamp is coming off the actual transformer. So I don't honestly know how relevant that is. So I can see here we've got voltage minus, voltage plus signal. There's only 2 wires into this, so I don't think we're actually taking any power to the preamps. It might be that with the GP12SM they actually take a voltage off, but it certainly doesn't look like it on this one because we've only got 2 wires and it looks like 0-volt signal there. Okay, well, I decided to go ahead and remove this bipolar board. I'm going to go back and get in touch with the gentleman who supplied the new one and just show him a photograph of what we had in place there in terms of the wiring, and just get him to confirm that that's all good before we plug in the new board. What we don't want to do is go blowing anything up. So a couple of things to note on the Bipolar Bear. First thing is this star washer here. I don't know if you can see that. I'll put it in the palm of my hand. Hopefully you can see that star washer. It goes under the ground point. This thing grounds to the chassis just there. It's not very good at all. One of the problems they had was with the bass frequencies. These things would shake and rattle around over time and move about, cause a poor connection. That was half the reason why these things failed. Usually because they'd forgotten to put the star washer underneath in the manufacturing process. But anyway, okay, so I'm going to take this out, have a word with the guy, see what he says, and then we'll fit the new board hopefully, and just check everything's working fine. Just as a point of interest with this particular board, I'd had a tech repair it in the past, and I think even prior to when he looked at it, you can see somebody here has bridged some connections, and so it's obviously, you know, they've not had a lot of choice and had to do that to get the thing to work in the past. I actually found the second time this failed, it was actually just the fan that wasn't working. And what it was is this particular rail across here wasn't connecting, so I've had to actually bridge that with a wire as well. And apologies for the poor soldering. So we also had some issues with the pads on the board. So unfortunately, it's a little bit of a mess. And again, I just know that this isn't going to be particularly reliable. So obviously not ideal. And I didn't want to leave this in the amp and have it blow up in the middle of a gig. Hence why I've ordered the replacement board. Okay, so fitting our new board. have a look. So I've got a 3-way connector here, 3-way connector here, 2 connectors out to the, so where the speaker outputs go, so I've got a double connector here on the board as well, and then where those other outputs were here, and yeah, he's labelled them. Yeah, so the other connector here, and I think they're labelled the same, so I'm just going to have a look. What we got? He's got signal, 0 volt. Let's see, he's got something signal, 0 volt signal, 0 volt. Where we've got plus and minus volts, he's got plus and minus 68 volts. Well, we're not using those on this particular amp. So to be honest, he's used exactly the same connectors. So I don't see how we would have a problem here. It looks to be, you know, almost identical in terms of, even in terms of how he's laid the board out, where the connectors go. They're pretty much exactly the same place. You can see there and there, there and there, and then down here. To me, that looks like it's we're onto a winner. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and connect this board up. So I'm going to start with the fan connections. Interesting thing that the gentleman told me about the fan is that his version of the board will actually make the fan run at an appropriate speed depending on the temperature of the MOSFETs, where I think on the original board it was sort of constant. Certainly always ran constant on my amps. You know, maybe different for others. Maybe that I've had faults with mine. Yeah, we'll get these screwed in. That's prefab. Negative. I always do this first because it's easier to do it before you've actually put the board in. I think you'd struggle to get the cables in to that connector block once the board is screwed down. So just make sure that's nice and tight. Okay, so that's the fan. Okay, next step. So let's just test fit the board. I think on this board, I think he actually earths at all 4 points, but he has got the same earth point marked. Yeah, they all match up exactly. Now what he did tell me is on some amps, you have to cut the prongs back on the heatsink on the rectifier. I'm looking at that here, I think that's fine. There's plenty of clearance, so that's really good. Obviously, as these boards go into a number of different amps, I think you know, he's catered for all situations, so that's really good. First thing I'm going to do is make sure we put that star washer back underneath the earth point. Okay, so I'll go ahead and fit these screws, and we'll come back when we're ready to test. Okay, well, that's the board screwed back in. So now we just need to attach the connectors. That will only go one way. So let's hope he's copied the way it's supposed to go. That one there is the same. I don't think we can put that the other way around. It doesn't go the other way around on the other board anyway, but we'll just check. Yeah, you can't do that. So all one-way connectors, which is good. And and this third one here. Okay, so that's all plugged in. So assuming that there's no change from his design to the original design, and I don't see why you would do that, because obviously that's going to cause problems and would it, you know, potentially destroy the board. So as long as there's no difference, it should all be okay. But as I say, I'll wait for the confirmation email and then we'll plug it in and try it. There's one thing I forgot to say or thought about afterwards, is that on each of these connectors, I think what I'll do is just put a little dab of glue with the glue gun, just to hold them in place, make sure that they don't vibrate out of position with the bass frequencies. So that's a top tip for anyone. With any of these amps, to be perfectly honest, is a little bit of glue with a glue gun just to hold those connectors in place. They do shake loose from time to time. If you're getting a funny noise on your amplifier, then it could just well be a loose connection. So always worth testing the connections, just checking they're all seated properly with the power off and disconnected, of course. Okay, well, we're back. We've had an email back from the gentleman that supplied the amp. He's given us the all clear. So now it's just the moment of truth. We're going to plug it in and see if it works. First thing I'm going to do is going to plug it in without a speaker and just make sure nothing goes bang before we connect the speaker. Maybe plug a bass in and see what happens. So let's find a cable in Australia. So 240 volts. Turn that on and see what happens. Okay. He did say that the fan might not run because it's temperature dependent, but obviously it's a very hot day here in Western Australia, so that is running already. Okay, so far so good. First power up, all the lights are on. Did see a flash on there though, which is a bit weird. I guess the only way I'm going to find out is plug a speaker in. So, can we get the cable to reach? Probably not. Excuse me while I shuffle this backwards. Let's plug this into a speaker output. Going into the 15-inch Trace Elliot. So let's see. Hope it doesn't go bang. Now with the old Trace Elliots, you used to get like a bump. And I think that was because I had a fault on the amp, so there's absolutely nothing here. It's dead silent. Let's take a cable and plug in a guitar. So, oh my god, fingers crossed something works here. Alright. Trusty Squire. Wow. Well, we got noise, so I think, ladies and gentlemen, that is working. So, and listen how quiet it is. I mean, the old Bipolar Bears, every single one I've had, there's been a background buzz or a hum or something. You know, when you turn them on, first of all, you get a little noise through the speaker. But there's nothing. And you know, if you look at the build of this power amp as well, it looks a really solid, well designed piece of kit. So congratulations to the guy that designed it. Really good. I'm really pleased. That means that I can go out and use this GP12SMX, which is one of my favourite amps. I really love the SMX series. You can see I've got a lot here. I've got Series 6 amps. So yeah, so as I was saying, GP12SMX, one of my favourite of the Trace Elliot amps. It was one of the last ones they did before they shut the company down the first time, and changed hands a number of times. Eventually ended up with PV buying it up, but that's for another video. In my opinion, the SM and the SMX range were one of the best. The first amp I had was a GP7SM 130, and that was a really good amp. I did a lot of gigs with that. Never any issues with it. Owned it for over 20 years. Fortunately, don't still have it. But you can see, been right through the range. I've got the V-Type. I've got two of the Series 6. I've got GP7SM. All of these amps are great. But you know, this one with a reliable power section in it, it will probably become my first go-to. Really like using the V-Type, but it's getting a bit expensive now to be taking that one out and just risking damaging it. We've had to replace the valves in it a couple of times, and they are very expensive. So get this one back up and running. That's really something. So I'm very pleased. Thanks very much for watching. If you'd like to see more of my Trace Elliot videos, I'll be making a few in the next few weeks, so stay tuned for that. Hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thank you.